Hi all. History of Counselling in India by Team B. Anu Miriam John, Mahima Evangeline, Praise Gloria, Gifty Isabella, and Chansam R. Cultural and religious history of counselling in India. A problem shared is a problem halved is an old saying that when things get difficult, we need someone to listen and to hear our story so that we can get a better insight of our own options. Counseling history can be traced back to tribal times when people would come together in a group and share their experiences and sometimes even their dreams. India being one of the most ancient civilizations, the help seeking traditions are ingrained in our behavior. Especially in India, we would not be able to address the felt need if we have a counseling approach that separates mind from body and individual from family. The ancient saying of Mata Pita Guru Devam reminded youngsters not only of the agents of counseling but also of the priority as to who should impart counseling at various stages of one's life. As civilizations developed, religion offered a type of counseling, usually by priests and pujaris who would listen to the devotees and advise them on their problems. In India, the roots of psychology can be traced back to the vast Vedic and epic literature. The most widely known counseling situations in the epics is that of Arjuna and Krishna in the Battle of Kurukshetra through Bhagavad Gita. In this, Krishna helps Arjuna to consolidate his internal personal resources to face and overcome stressful situations in the battle. Krishna uses a few simple constructs to enable Arjuna to get a hold of himself through self-understanding and to do his duties in life. Arjuna turns around as a confident and optimistic warrior. This is one of the most successful stories of psychotherapy or cognitive behavior therapy relevantly applied in the collective consciousness of our country. Another example is that of Hanuman in Ramayana. Hanuman was always considered wise and brave, but he did not know his full potential until he was reminded by Jambavan. A patient who has lost confidence and feels unable to meet life's challenges is like Hanuman in this story. The power to change his life rests within himself. He has temporarily lost the knowledge of this. It is the job of a therapist to restore this power back to the patient. Let us consider a few of the counseling platforms used within the traditional, cultural, and religious backgrounds in India. Ayurveda. It is considered one of the most ancient medical systems practiced in India. Ayurveda means the science of life. It is interesting that this very early system integrates nutrition, the environment, and the psychological well-being as a holistic approach to mental health. In addition to Ayurvedic Vaidhs, there were also Mandravadis, traditional healers in the rural villages of India. Having a deep reverence and concern for each other, this relationship between the Mandravadi and the patient is considered sacred and complete, more or less like the relationship between a therapist and a client. Astrology. It is also very helpful in healing and counseling situations in India. The role of the Vedic astrologer as a consultant, as a counselor, and a spiritual guide is even now prevailing practice in India. Yoga. The science of meditation and yoga developed around 5,000 years ago in India. Yoga facilitates the expansion of awareness, achieving higher state of consciousness, and experiencing and realizing the self. Thus, it must be noted that the professional counseling will only supplement but not supplant the traditional healing methods because of their strong and deeply rooted historical heritage in India. The moral, ethical, and spiritual realms of mind cannot be omitted in counseling and therapy in India. History of counseling in Kerala. Many of the old historical stories and literatures of Kerala has some elements of counseling. Most of it projects to asserting humanistic values over and above the taboos and superstitions of yesteryears. One of the most famous novels of ancient Kerala is Martandavarma. In this novel, there is a female character Subhadra through whom the author is projecting a futuristic vision of the new woman in the Indian context. Also, the surrender of kingship by King Martandavarma to Sri Padmanabha, the official deity of the state, and king being just a sevak receiving the counseling from the deity to run the state affairs can also be seen as a higher order of counseling in ancient Kerala traditions. Another famous work is Malayalam lullaby sang by the Queen of Colattu Nadu. The king used to play chaturanga, which was the formal form of chess with the wise men in his court. One day, as he was playing, the king began to lose. Seeing this, the queen, in the pretense of putting her child to sleep, began to sing a lullaby, the words of which was indicative of advising to push the pawn. The king understood the message his wife was trying to tell him, and he pushed the pawn to win the game. The counseling given by the queen through the lullaby at the right time saved the king from losing the game. The collective therapeutic potential art form of Theyyam of North Kerala is an interesting saga. This folk ritual of Theyyam became the alternative of a cathartic release of transgenerational collective victimhood and trauma long endured by the people belonging to the lower caste communities. This helps us in understanding Theyyam as a psycho-cultural phenomenon and the therapeutic dynamics it offers.
Contemporary counseling in India and Kolkata. Counseling in Indian context. India is strongly influenced by Western research and methodology, and at the other hand, it is strongly influenced by the local context in which it is practiced. Culture is a powerful variable when it comes to efficiency of counseling. A mindless import of counseling method from the West will not help. According to alumni, for counseling to be more efficient, it is important for the counselors to understand what his or her client are culturally prepared for and will bridge between the subjective and objective epistemologies. The hybrid elements of Western and Eastern methods are to be incorporated in counseling. The counselors use mostly talk-based counseling with the help of Western-oriented theories. They should also use approaches which are Eastern or Indian based, such as brainstorming, directive approach, but non-advised implantation of yoga philosophy, yoga breathing exercises, concept of acceptance and endurance, and the use of metaphor from Indian epics and classical text. However, counselors should try to create systemized evidence-based indigenous counseling method. The methods that they use shall be integrative and contextually adapted for cultural sensitization. Among the science, it must thus be specifically in psychology that India has made her greatest contribution. Psychology in its original sense. Psychology as the science of the soul and the science of consciousness. For no other culture has such a treasure house of practical psychology and spiritual knowledge as its heritage. For the last few decades, there is growing realization that for better practice for psychiatry and counseling, we must make more use of rich Indian philosophical and religious tradition. As the family is almost inseparable from the individual managing patients, especially those with a mental illness, without taking the family into account, is almost impossible. Unlike the West, the Indian society is collectivist society for emphasis on family unity and integrity. Counseling in West Bengal. Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee, a well-known jurist and respected educator, who was then the planning head of the University of Calcutta, was so impressed by its promise and success that he chose to incorporate experimental psychology in the Calcutta University postgraduate course of studies Calcutta. On the request of Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee, eminent philosopher Dr. Bojendra Nath, professor of mental and moral philosophy at the same university, designed the syllabus in 1905 and created the first laboratory for demonstrative purpose. Calcutta University Department of Psychology holds the distinction of hosting Asia's second experimental psychology laboratory after Japan.
History of counseling in Nagaland. Many tribes of the Naga people claim that their forefathers came from Yunnan, which is in China. Some believe that they were forcibly relocated during the construction of China's Great Wall. The Nagas arrived at Makhel after traveling from China through Myanmar's forests. The indigenous Naga religions are intriguing in nature since they are animistic and center on superstition, logic, and ethical living. The Nagas have a number of traditional religions that forefathers followed. The British introduced Christianity to Nagaland in the mid-19th century when they converted the Naga tribes from animist and folk religious traditions. In Nagaland, The notion of counseling is still in its infancy. As a result, there are far too many difficulties and misunderstandings concerning counseling and counselors. Many people seek the title of counselor, therefore, the term counseling is used quite loosely by diverse groups of people. During the times of forefather, there were no such appointed person for counseling, but the king of a village sure to had advisors by his side. The leader of a clan would seek advice from the elderly. Anyone who seeks advice goes to the older folks for their advice and wisdom. Some village has a board or consisting of chosen leaders like panchayats, where any matter or problems are brought to them and they solve it or give the best possible advice to rule out the conflict or to provide answers. Counseling has occurred in different forms, although informally for many years and generations, maybe since the dawn of civilization. The work of Sigmund Freud, a prominent neurologist and psychotherapist, was the trigger for the formal session, which was followed by many others. We must recognize that no two people are alike and that perceptions differ from people to people. So an individual's experience with counseling may differ. There may be times when an initial encounter with a session was disastrous, leaving us with more questions and discomfort. But it is always encouraged to try counseling again because it may take multiple visits from different counselors to find our comfort in working out our concerns.
I am going to talk about history and the cultural aspect of counseling in Karnataka, Bangalore. In the urban city Bangalore, there are many different counseling services offered: career counseling within the corporate world, government-funded counseling and non-governmental counseling centers, NGOs, secular and non-secular. There are counseling services offered as stand-alone service as a part of holistic interventions such as combinations of long-term stay in institution with rehabilitating programs. Besides counseling, variations of training in psychotherapy, psychology, and coaching are offered in short and long-term courses. Further, various other methods such as hypnotherapy and yoga therapy exist. The problem of what is what relates back to the previous statement that titles are not accredited or projected and therefore a wide range of service are offered with various practices. Now let's look into the aspect of academic profession. The foundation of the Department of Existential Psychology at Kolkata University in 1916 marked the beginning of psychology as the independent field in India. Professor Narendranath Sengupta, who received his schooling at Harvard University with Hugo Monksberg, a student of William Wundt, was named the department's first chairman. The university department began offering undergraduate and graduate courses. This department undertook experimental laboratory research in the fields of depth perception, psychophysics, and attention under his dynamic supervision, which encouraged early work at the other centers in India. The history of the Department of Counseling and Educational Psychology has been categorized by several changes in psychology and the title reflecting the national evolution of the field of counseling in psychology. In 1905, psychology became the formal discipline at NMSU with the establishment of the Department of Political Economy and Psychology. In 1909, it was renamed in the Department of Psychology and Pedagogy. In 1918, it became the Department of Vocational Education, and in 1925, the name changed to the Department of Agricultural Education. The Department of Education was established at NMSU in 1930.
Psychiatry in Ancient Tamil Nadu. Manimeghala is the Tamil novel written by Seethalai Sathanaar during the Sangam period. This novel talks about the present day schizophrenia. Manimeghala is a protagonist of the novel. She witnessed the madman wandering on the streets. His madness was well described in this novel. She requested the king to convert all the jails into the charity place where the mentally ill can live and release the prisoners. Hospitals for mentally ill people around 1063 to 1069 AD. Our Temple of Lord Venkateshwara at Tirumukkudal, Sengalpet district, Tamil Nadu contains inscription on the walls belonging to Chola period. In that inscription, it was written that the king Veera Rajendra Chola, the grandson of the great emperor Rajaraja Chola, built the world's first mental hospital inside the temple's campus and named as Veera Choleswara Hospital. A temple treatment for mentally ill people, also called asylum. A team led by Ramnathan Raghuram, who studied all 31 people who came for help and stayed at the Muthuswami temple between June and August 2000. The patients were evaluated by a trained psychiatrist. All they did was a daily morning prayer in temple and well examined by the psychiatrist along with medicines, and they showed a good improvement. Healing culture of Tamil Nadu. St. Anthony's Church at Puliambatti village in Thoothukudi district of Tamil Nadu is known for its miracle. There are three major rituals in this church. First one is Kodimaram, where the mental patients hug, kiss and dedicate garland to the Kodimaram, believing that they will get cured. They were chained up in the church and often the church father would pray for them. Uruvam Koduthal. The mentally ill people or their relatives offer any shape of the body part in the form of gold or silver to the church in order to get cured. Final ritual is Asanam. Relatives of the patients offer food for the visitors of the church or to the whole people in the village as an offering to God so that they might get cure for the mental as well as the physical disease. Wiping ritual. The festival of Periyandavar, celebrated for 15 days once in 2 years at Kulyanur village. The priest ties the mentally ill person on the neem tree and wipes them, believing that the evil spirit will run off by playing music and singing songs. St. Michael's Church. St. Michael is worshipped by a large number of devotees at Rajavur village in Kanyakumari district. People offer garland and made of money to the statue of St. Michael, and remaining rituals are same as like us in St. Anthony's Church, like Kodimaram, Uruvam Koduthal and Asanam. The musical therapy, Kodangi, is a small double-sided musical instrument. When the beat starts, the people who are affected mentally would dance first and they were cured at the end of the rituals. It is believed commonly in Tamil Nadu, and this Kodangi was played by a man called Kodangi. Biblical perspective. We see kings being counseled in the Bible throughout the Old Testament. How they were counseled by the ministers and other God-appointed people or even prophets. For example, Queen Esther and the King David seeking the counsel from the man of God. We see many examples in New Testaments where Jesus himself counseling his disciples and others. Conclusion. Counseling has had tremendous results over the past in solving cases, and counseling psychology is one of the most effective tools in handling mental breakdown. The result of its usage in the modern world have become more effective over the years. I have learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel, said Maya Angelou. Still, people of some region are not aware of counseling and its goodness. We counselors has the responsibility to spread the counseling to the needy.